Well, welcome everybody to the next interview in our series of interviews with our endorsed candidates. Today we have Andrew Van Winkle with us, who is running for Spokane County Superior Court Judge position 11. And congratulations on being our endorsed candidate. Andrew, thanks for being with us today.
Well, thank you, MJ, and thanks for having me here to talk about the race. As you know, judge elections, they're down at the bottom of the ballot. A lot of people, they might fill out their ballot, kind of the front page or the first few, but then as they get going along, they don't know who to vote for. And a lot of people, sadly, they just leave it blank. They stop voting and turn it in halfway done. And it's really nice that we've got ways this year to let people know how to fill out their whole ballot, that there's people that they can trust and support all the way down from the top to the bottom. So thank you.
Yeah, you bet. And that was one of our big goals this year, is to try to help, people navigate how to vote for judges better. So that's exactly what we're trying to do. And you brought up the primary too. It's so important for people to know ballots drop this week for the primary election. And it's very important that everybody get out and vote in this primary election. You only get to vote for the top two candidates in the general election in November. So that means you've got your choice of you get your pick of the litter, for lack of a better word or term, when you vote in the primary election. So make sure to vote in this primary election and for our endorsed candidates. So we're here to help you get to know Andrew better. So Andrew, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and why you are running.
Well, I'm originally from Spokane, born and raised. I'm a third-generation Spokaneite, graduate of Shadle Park High School and Spokane Falls Community College. And my background, I started out in the law actually back in 2007. I was in undergrad and I was working an internship with the Washington State Senate, and really privileged to be able to have that experience working for the seat of government here. And then went back 2008, 2009, worked those sessions as well, took a year off after finishing undergrad in 08 and kept working for our state Senate. And it was the people that I met there who really encouraged me to think about a career in law and go to law school. No one in my family had ever been a lawyer. My parents didn't graduate from college, so this was really new in my family. But I received good encouragement there and ended up going to UW Law over in Seattle and graduated from there. And after that, I was lucky enough to get a job coming back here to Spokane with Judge Kevin Korsmo. Judge Korsmo was a judge on the Washington State Court of Appeals here in Spokane. And before that, he was a career prosecutor, and he has the distinction of having argued more cases in the Court of Appeals as a lawyer than any other lawyer that we've been able to find. He did hundreds of them, and I don't think there will ever be another person who argued as many as he had. He was most overqualified judge I've ever met, and I was really privileged to be able to learn about the law under his instruction and with him, because lawyers, when you come out of law school, you don't know anything about the law. And so if you're lucky enough as a lawyer, you get a clerkship with a judge working under them for a couple of years, learning the ropes before going out into practice. And that was my experience. And it was through Judge Korsmo's mentoring that I wound up being a prosecutor, and ended up being a prosecutor over in Chelan County for 5 years. And being in a small county, it's a little interesting. You don't have anyone else to rely on. There's not other departments like you have in Spokane, where you have a sex crimes department or major crimes or misdemeanors. Small office, everyone just pitches in and does it together. So I've tried everything from traffic tickets to homicide and everything in between. You get a little bit of everything. And then after that's done, you have to go help out with the civil work or public records requests. And then 2019, things changed. My wife and I moved back here to Spokane. I was called back because a permanent position opened up at the Court of Appeals for a staff attorney, where I had started out. And my parents are getting older, and I've got family here in Spokane, and it was just the right time to come back home. And so 2019, we picked up, moved back here to come back to where I started my legal career. And at the Court of Appeals, I'm the senior staff attorney there right now. And my job at the court is to work with and train and mentor all the law clerks who had the jobs that I used to have working for the judges. So I help get them trained up in the way that Judge Korsmo trained me as a lawyer. I help the judges with their cases, bouncing ideas off them and me, and trying to work through, because the appellate courts, it's not easy. They get the issues where The law is gray, undecided, and it's not always clear what the answer should be. And so we have to work together to figure out how those cases are decided. And then for the last 3 years, I've also been working in the Superior Court where I'm running now as a pro tem court commissioner. And a court commissioner is like a judge, but they're appointed, not elected, and they don't do jury trials like an elected judge does. And then a pro tem is just a substitute because everything in the law has to have a fancy name and label attached to it. But pro tem is someone who goes in when the judge or court commissioner is out sick or on vacation, puts on the black robe and decides cases. And so for the last 3 years, I've been doing that in the Superior Court where I've presided over hundreds of cases, close to 24 bench trials, non-jury trials. And this year I'm taking the leap and running for judge.
Kind of just the next step. You've been had great experience, it sounds like. So that's fabulous. So Andrew, why should citizens vote for you over the other candidates that are running in your race? What really differentiates you?
Well, the big thing is there's 4 of us running, and one of them is the incumbent, Tim Fennessy. And it's really interesting to have a race, a judicial race, anywhere in Washington where there's more than 2 candidates on it. The last time that Spokane had a contested judicial race with more than 2 candidates was in 2008. The last time there was an open position, a vacancy where the incumbent was not running again. But the last time that Spokane or anywhere else in the state has had a contested judicial race where the incumbent was still in and there were so many people running, I can't find one. This is really unique. And so that gets to the question of why do you have so many people running against one judge? When every 4 years, every judge in the state, every Superior Court judge is on the ballot this year. So all 50-some Superior Court judges in King County are on the ballot this year. All 13 Superior Court judges in Spokane County are on the ballot this year. But despite 13 judges on the ballot, only 2 are contested. And 3 of the people who could be running against other judges have chosen to run against Judge Fennessy. And so I'll start with Judge Fennessy on what sets me apart from him. He's been doing this for 8 years. And in that time, he's accrued a negative reputation. He's been disciplined by the Washington State Commission on Judicial Conduct. In 2019, he was disciplined for not getting cases decided timely. By law, judges, after a case is submitted, only have a couple of months to get the case decided, or else they get in trouble with the state and the overseers. And he got in trouble for that. And I can tell you, been collecting the records. I just got a new batch of records today from the county that shows that he's still not getting cases done in time. And that's something that's going to have to be addressed. But you've got judges who aren't getting the work done within the time limits prescribed by law. You've also got a judge who's the most disqualified judge of any other judge on the Superior Court. So disqualification in Washington, every party has the right to disqualify a judge, kick them off their case, no questions asked, any reason. Just before that judge makes a decision, you just say, Judge, I don't want you hearing my case. And that's that. Both sides get to do that as a matter of right. Since 2019, so the last 4.5 years, Judge Fennessy has been disqualified hundreds of times, hundreds. He has more than 1 out of every 3 disqualifications filed over the last 4.5 years. A third is fine if there's only 3 judges, but when you have 13, it should really be about 7%. And that disqualifications that he gets, it's because lawyers don't like being in his courtroom. They don't like being in front of him. They don't like his demeanor, the way that they treat him. It's not so much the decisions that he makes. It's just the way that he treats people. So that's why Judge Fennessy ended up getting 3 opponents. If you know one of the other opponents, Dale Anderson, he's not campaigning. He doesn't have a website. He's not doing anything. He's got no signs. As he told the Spokesman Review last month, he's a one-issue candidate. He is running. He paid the filing fee, $2,200, just so he could tell people that Judge Fennessy is not a good judge, does not treat people fairly, does not treat people kindly. So you've got a person who's running and willing to pay out of pocket just to let other folks know about this judge. And then the 4th candidate in the race, Jerry Scharf, is a sitting court commissioner, former prosecutor. He and I have actually very similar backgrounds. I went into Minuteman Press last week to pay my bill because they're doing some of my campaign work. And I go in and they actually thought I was Jerry. Not only do we have similar backgrounds, we actually look similar too. They started giving me his stuff. And I said, hold on. I'm the other bald guy. They go, oh yeah, you are. It was fine though. He and I, we just saw each other in Cheney at the rodeo over the weekend and had a good chuckle over it. But no, Jerry, he's a good guy. But what really sets me apart from Jerry is my experience at the Court of Appeals. He's got experience on the bench. He's got experience as a lawyer. He's got experience trying cases. But when it comes to working with the difficult issues, the issues on the margins of the law, where there's not a clear answer or a right answer or a wrong answer, or it's undecided, he doesn't have that experience. He doesn't have the depth of experience that I have with hundreds of appeals, working on appeals from all over central and eastern Washington. Because the Court of Appeals, we don't just review Superior Court cases out of Spokane County. We review cases from all 20 counties east of the Cascades, all of central and eastern Washington. So an issue that Spokane might never see, except maybe once in a blue moon or once a decade, in aggregate over those counties, it gets seen by at least one county and it comes up to the Court of Appeals. So I've had the chance to work with and grapple with the issues that judges only see a few times in their career, but for me, that's day in and day out. So the tough issues, that's what really sets me apart. Another thing that sets me apart is I'm regularly out training lawyer groups, judge groups, other groups on the law. Earlier this month, I did a training for the Washington State Office of Public Defense, a statewide organization. Last month, I was asked to do a training for the Washington State Association of Prosecuting Attorneys at their annual summer training. I've been a trainer for the Washington State Attorney General's office. I've been a trainer for the Washington State Judicial Conference. So another thing that sets me apart is that I've been recognized by my peers and other colleagues and other judges as an expert on the law and asked to teach others and convey the information and knowledge that I have to others. And it's humbling to be recognized and asked to do those trainings. And it's humbling for other people who have way more experience than you reach out to you and ask you to teach them what you know. And I really appreciate that. But that's something that Commissioner Sharsh, Jerry, doesn't have on his resume that I do. But other than that, we're pretty similar. But I have the edge on working with and grappling with the difficult issues that he hasn't had to come across in his career.
Well, that's very helpful information. I think that, sets you apart, Andrew, for sure. So in your view as a judge candidate, how do you perceive the structure of your role within the constitutional system, and how do you intend to fulfill your responsibilities accordingly? I think this is probably one of the biggest questions that people have. They want to know how you align yourself with the Constitution and, how you're going to judge these cases accordingly.
That's something that's really on the top of a lot of people's minds in the country now, not just in Washington, is all over the place. We see about and hear about and read about activist judges who it feels like overstep. And I think it's really important for restoring confidence in the judiciary in this community and in this country that people see judges who understand the constitutional separation of powers that the founding fathers envisioned and wanted to ensure that we didn't have a king or a monarchy or an oligarchy, that they understood that you have these three branches of government who know their lane and stay in their lane, except when they have to be a check on each other. And so for me, coming from a position where I got my start working for the legislature, I couldn't imagine a better start for teaching someone the amazing democracy that we have in this country. When I worked for the legislature, I got to see how the sausage was made. It is a little ugly, just like making any meat.
Yeah.
But you see all the stakeholders, all the people who come in, fielding phone calls from regular people like you and me or anyone else out there, and actually having someone pick up and listen to their concern and answer them, and being able to testify on bills and take this whole range of perspectives. And at the end of it, you pass a bill and make a law. Maybe I like it, maybe I don't. But the fact is, it was done openly and transparently. And you can contrast that with courts, where you've got two parties, you don't have all the stakeholders, you don't have all the perspectives represented in the case, and it's not necessarily open or as open as it should be and public as it should be. And you just think, are judges really the ones who should be making laws when they've got such a limited view of what's before them? Or would we rather our laws be made based upon the best information and all the information that's possible? And so I have a deep respect for our legislature. I have a deep respect for the legislative process that I don't always see in other judges. And I think that's sad. And I think that's something that I'll bring to the bench with me is my experience seeing democracy in action from all those different angles. I've worked for the legislative branch. As a prosecutor, I worked for the executive branch. And for most of my career, I've worked for the judiciary and House for the courts. So I've worked in all three branches of government. I know how they're supposed to work, and I know that they do work, and that there's good people who care about their jobs and care about making it work. And the judges shouldn't be stepping on their toes, getting in their way, overstepping their bounds. So that's really where I set myself apart, is for me, having been in those positions, it's first and foremost in my mind. I know those people, I know that they're good people doing good work, and I got to trust them to do that work.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. That makes a lot of sense. Um, you talked a little bit about restoring, the respect and the integrity. I think I'd like to kind of go into that a little more. As a judge candidate, what strategies will you employ to help restore and enhance public respect for the judiciary within the community?
Well, the big thing, and it seems kind of simple, and it is, it's low-hanging fruit, it's explaining your decisions. Judges so often make a decision at the trial court level and they don't explain it. And that leaves parties frustrated and angry and feel like they didn't get a fair hearing. Because ultimately, it's not the winning party who you want to respect your decision, or the winning party who you want to feel had a fair hearing. It's the opposing party, it's the losing party. Because judges, they don't have any power to enforce their judgments. So much of judgments and judging in courts rely on voluntary compliance, people just going, well, this is what the judge ruled and that's what I need to do. And if people don't respect courts, the party that doesn't prevail is going to stop doing that. They're going to start questioning it in other ways. And one of the ways that you deal with that is you explain your decision, the same way that the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court explain their decisions. Trial court judges so often don't create a record or explain their decision. And so many times, I can tell you, the Court of Appeals and Supreme Court will send cases back for the judge to explain their reasoning and say, Judge, you didn't create an adequate record to explain why you did this. And because you didn't create an adequate record to explain why you did this, we can't determine if you got it right or wrong. And if we can't determine as other lawyers and judges whether you got it right or wrong, well, how do you think the party who lost feels if other judges can't even figure it out? So you have to explain yourself. You have to explain your reasoning. And you have to be sincere about it. You can't just make a decree and say, well, that's my ruling, live with it, too bad, kill me if you don't like it. You're not going to convince everyone, but you at least need to explain yourself. It's like going back to grade school where they say, show your work, show your math. How did you get to this answer? It's not enough that you know that the answer is 42. We want to know how you got there. And so many judges, I think there'd be a lot more respect in the community if they just took that step and explained themselves.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, we've heard a lot about victims, or we don't hear enough about victims' rights. I think, in fact, we have a system that doesn't seem to honor that as much. So how do you balance, as a potential judge, the crime victims and defendants in ensuring judgments are fair?
That's something that's really important to me, is the rights of crime victims in this state, because I do feel that crime victims have become an afterthought in the criminal justice system in this state. And we have a criminal justice system set up that's got four purposes behind it. And these four purposes, they go back to England. This has been all of Western civilization's theory behind criminal laws for over centuries. We do four things. We have criminal laws and sanctions to punish people, for one. Okay, that's pretty self-evident. But also to deter future crimes. Also, for third, to rehabilitate that person so they don't commit further crimes and so that they can better themselves. And four, for incapacitation for some people who you just can't rehabilitate society has decided that those people just need to be locked up. And that's where the 3 strikes law comes from, life without parole comes from. And that's harsh. And you want to save that only for people who truly can't be rehabilitated. But getting back to punishment, punishment is ultimately, it's a form of retribution, and it's retribution for society and for the victim, because the courts exist and the criminal justice system exists so people don't take the law into their hands. And that's what's going to happen. If people don't feel like they're being heard, they don't feel like the courts are doing what they were set up to do, you're going to see people take the law into their own hands. And that's the last thing we want. We don't want to return to how it worked back in the 1400s and 1300s and going back further in the Dark Ages, where the courts weren't there doing justice and people would just have their blood vendettas and take the law into their hands. And so we've got a system that's set up, it's been worked for us for several centuries, but it's fragile. And it can go away if we don't keep in mind why we created it in the first place so many centuries ago. And crime victims need to be at the front of that.
Mhm.
And so one of the things that I've seen that's been really frustrating to me is in Washington, our state constitution, we amended it most recently back in 2010 to give crime victims more rights. And we've got statutes in our state laws to give crime victims rights. Crime victims, they have a right to be heard at all stages of the proceeding. They have the right to be heard not just personally, but through an advocate if they don't want to talk to the court themselves. They have a right to address the court on those issues, to have their opinions heard. They have the right to know when case hearings are, court hearings are, and the proposed resolutions, and to address the court. And so often, crime victims, they're not afforded any of those rights. I have heard of judges who have refused to let crime victims address the court. I've heard of judges who have refused to let crime victims address the court through advocates. I've heard of judges who only let victims speak at sentencing, but at no other stages of the case. I've heard of judges who've allowed abusive discovery into victims' backgrounds, even if that evidence would never be admissible at trial. And these are all things that deter people from reporting crimes in the first place, being involved in the criminal justice system, and it just leaves people with a bad taste in their mouth. I can tell you personally, last year I was a victim of a crime. Drunk driver took out my fence, my neighbor's fence, several cars, 2 other fences on the block, and a power pole owned by a Vista.
Wow.
The guy's somehow doing okay. Didn't have any serious injuries, but he did get charged with DUI. He was prosecuted in Spokane Municipal Court by the Municipal Prosecutor's Office. So not the county prosecutor, not Larry Haskell's office, not the Attorney General, not Superior Court where I'm running. I just want to clarify that. And after the case got started, I looked into it, reached out, said, hey, I wanted to talk about it, and talk about my neighbor who couldn't fix their fence. I ended up fixing my neighbor's fence. My wife and I, we did the labor ourselves because my neighbor couldn't pay for it. In Vista, they had their power pole that had to be replaced. And when I went back to check on the case again, I found out it was done. The guy had pled guilty to reduced offense. No one ever said, Mr. Van Winkle, do you have restitution? How about your neighbor? Could they fix their fence? How about a Vista? How much are their ratepayers going to have to pay for that power pole that guy took out and how to be replaced? The court didn't enter a restitution order. The court didn't ask if there was any restitution. The court didn't ask if any of the victims had been talked to or needed to be heard from. And I know I'm not the only person who's had that experience, not just in municipal court, but in other courts. And I can tell you on the campaign trail, I've heard so many similar stories from people who say, yeah, I was a victim of a crime and I know that charges were filed and then I never heard back on anything and the judge never asked. And I can tell you as a prosecutor, not every place is like that. When I was in Chelan County, it didn't matter if I was in district court or superior court. None of our judges would resolve a case without asking, Mr. Van Winkle, how does the victim feel about that? Have you talked to the victim about that? And if I said, well, Judge, I don't know, the next question would be, well, what steps have you taken to reach out to the victim? Have you called them? Have you emailed them? Have you tried to find them? Have you sent them a letter? And if my answer was no, I guarantee you, my boss, the elected prosecutor, was going to be hearing about it after court, and it was not going to be good. And if it's a priority for the judges, it's a priority for the prosecutors. And that's how it works. If people are going to take an interest in crime victims, and if crime victims are going to be heard from, it's only going to happen if judges say so, if judges make it a priority and say, we need to know that the victim's been contacted. We need to know that you're talking to the victim, or at least have tried, or that the victim has said they don't want to be involved and they're okay going forward without being involved. We need to hear that. And so many judges don't take that simple step of just asking and ensuring that the crime victim's statutory and constitutional rights have been protected. So that's one thing that
Wow.
I think we need to see change. And it's so easy because all that the judge has to do is ask. That's what the Constitution requires and the law requires, is just asking.
Yeah. And it sounds like it's a culture. It could be a culture if your experience was so different in Chelan County, that it is a culture within, a county possibly. And what I'm excited about is when you become judge, hopefully, God willing, you will help to change that culture here in Spokane to be more of an advocate for our crime victims. Yeah, that's very important. Appreciate your comments on that. So, Andrew, anything else that you want our voters to know? Is there anything else you want to discuss with them?
Well, I just want to reiterate how important it is for people to vote in that August primary, because there's 4 of us on the ballot. So many people, they just don't vote on it, or they just mark the first box. And it turns out the first box in my race is Dale Anderson, the guy who's not actually running. He's just running to tell people about Judge Fennessy and how bad he is. And so we need people who are going to read the ballot, read up on the candidates. And I just appreciate people taking the time to view this. And I appreciate you for taking the time to interview me. So thank you.
You bet. You bet. We're happy to and glad to get this information out to the voters. Again, I think this has been one of the most challenging things in the way we do things, especially with judges. And it's probably one of the most important. I think they're all important positions, our elected positions, but my goodness, when you are the one sitting on those benches making those decisions, we've got to have a better system of informing voters about who our candidates are. So we've really enjoyed this opportunity, to get to know you. Andrew, where can people go to find more information about you or how to donate to your campaign?
www.votevw.org.
Nice, very simple. All right, so you heard it there. Go to www.votevw.org. You can also go to SpokaneGOP.com website, where we have a link to Andrew's website on our website. And you can also find our rack cards that we have. We're out promoting all of our endorsed candidates. I don't even know if you can see that very good. And Andrew is on there. So Andrew, thank you so much for spending time with us today to help inform our voters about you and why you want to become the next Superior Court judge in Spokane. And we look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you, too.